I think the most overrated marketing tactic that's going to go out of style is just throw more money at it, search or whatever. Building a really strong brand is very important because, driving brand recognition gets you out of the AC repair near me mentality.
The home services industry is changing, and the business owners who adapt will lead it. We bring contractors and industry leaders together to break down what's actually working. Data, operations, and strategies that drive results. This is Beyond the Truck Roll.
Welcome to Beyond the Truck Roll. Today we are talking about the future of HVAC marketing across contractors, OEMs, and distributors. I have a fantastic guest on today. His name is Eddie. He's with Mediagistic. Can you introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, thanks, Wes. I'm Eddie Childs. I'm with Mediagistic. I'm the VP of Growth Marketing. I've been working in HVAC marketing for the last 12 years, and then my agency goes back to 1999. So we've really kind of been in the space for quite a while, and we have worked with thousands of contractors during that time. I am a massive college football fan, so I spend most of my fall doing nothing pretty much but watching college football. Georgia Bulldogs fan, so hopefully that doesn't alienate anybody. But, if anybody wants to hit me up on LinkedIn or Facebook or something and talk some trash, I love talking trash about football and, encounter people from all walks of, from all fan bases. So that's a fun area to connect with people.
Well, I feel like SEC football is, when it comes to college football, the real experience. I am personally a Colorado alumni. So we just don't have the same experience. We're always pretty bad, but we have an interesting head coach with Deion Sanders.
Yeah, you've got some interesting personalities in that program, and then the Big Ten is on the rise. Two national championships in a row. So the SEC cannot claim dominance every single year anymore. So I like that. Yeah. I kind of like what's going on in that environment. It's becoming more competitive and more teams are getting in the mix. And what happened in Indiana last year was awesome. I was pulling for them the whole way. So, after Georgia got out, but I really like the outcome there.
Today, I just want to begin asking you a question. Like, what are the biggest shifts you're seeing in HVAC marketing?
Boy, yeah, I mean, we're really in kind of an inflection point right now, right? So HVAC marketing is really kind of in a cost up, complexity up sort of phase with more channels, tons of noise, more expensive clicks. Your cost per acquisition is probably going through the roof. And we're also living in a world right now where Google searches are yielding 0 clicks at about a 58% kind of rate there, and consumer behavior itself is shifting towards large language model tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, and Claude for basic search behavior more. And the way those tools work is more of it surfaces fewer providers. It's more question and answer based, and there are just fewer clicks happening. So it's a massive shift in the industry. And really, customer acquisition costs are probably, they're up meaningfully versus 3 to 5 years ago, especially on search and paid social. And, I think the biggest shift though is that homeowners are still delaying big purchases, and the ones who are doing more homework. They're becoming more proactive and less reactive. They're shopping multiple providers, and they're comparing costs in things like large language models, Yelp, Angie, et cetera. The way that they're looking at those tools is on a cost basis, and the contractor's getting less of an opportunity to tell a value story before the homeowner is able to compare costs. So it's just costing a lot more to reach homeowners and stay visible throughout their buyer's journey. A couple of things I'd say working in favor is the market's on a rebound trajectory after a pretty dismal 2025. We're reportedly going to have a hotter than average June and July. And those are kind of the tailwinds, but we're still seeing headwinds around equipment prices, the regulatory environment. That's all placing upward pressure on the industry, and the contractors who win are the ones who are adapting to this marketplace, which is just incredibly complex versus the way it was, 10 to 12 years ago.
When you're talking about the changes, basically, I wanted to follow up on something you said. So, would it be relevant to say that leads are like Google ads, Facebook ads, like you're spending more money and getting less out of it because the people are comparing and shopping? And so, like, are you getting as much out of your leads as you used to?
Yes and no. It kind of, I hate to say the stereotypical marketer answer where I say it depends, but you're seeing probably fewer leads that are converting, but a lot of that has to do with what you're doing after the lead occurs. What are your lead handling practices? How are you, working, with the intent of that homeowner? So for example, paid search, a lot of the volume in paid search is around reactive buying mentality, right? So we can see that in the analytics that the types of searches around repair and service are, astronomically higher than just install, right? So contractors who are able to take those leads, they're priced right on service, they're profitable on service, they're doing the things that will flip a service call into a turnover. They're turning it into an install with an age system as opposed to like band-aiding it. And then they're putting those customers on a maintenance program. I would say that those are the ones who are fundamentally exercising really good business practices, and they're getting the most out of their leads. So yes, a lot of what we're seeing is like maybe there are fewer leads happening that are converting right away because there's multiple kind of estimates and comparisons happening. But I think the opportunity is still the same for somebody who's operationally sound, and they're handling the leads in a really intentional way. One thing we find is a lot of contractors believe they have a lead volume problem, and they actually don't. They're getting enough leads, and the leads actually are pretty solid. It's just all those things. What are you doing after the lead occurs is to make the most of the opportunity, I think is the next question that they should be asking.
Yeah, and I assume there's a lot that goes into that, like response rate. Some of them might not even be responding to any of them. And so,
Sure.
what do you see when it comes to responding to, or not only responding to leads, but like interacting with the top of funnel where things go wrong? And curious also, like your thoughts on the differences between type of contractor that's doing this. And so there's a lot of PE going on in the industry, and like,
Yeah.
are they fundamentally doing it differently than your mom and pops? And so kind of a loaded question, but what do you see in terms of like response to the leads that are coming in?
Well, so yeah, that's a great question, Wes. So the first contractor to respond to the lead wins almost 78% of the time. So what do I mean by that? Well, you have to think about some of the different buyer's journeys that happen in HVAC. So for the most part, we know again from just looking at search volume that most homeowners shop reactively. They wait for their system to break, and then they seek to repair first, right? So that particular buying mentality is going to go hit the Google local map pack, and they're going to call every provider in the Google local map pack immediately. First one to pick up the phone and say they can roll a truck generally tends to win, more often than not, because they're in a distressed purchasing behavior. The family's upset. They're hot. Maybe they had to put them up at like a hotel and the cost is crushing them, whatever the reason. There's a real sense of distress and urgency. So the contractor who picks up the phone when it calls and is like, yeah, I can get a truck out there ASAP, they're going to win those very often. Now in this scenario where they're shopping multiple providers, it's very similar. So what happens there is that the first provider who talks to them provides an estimate, or it comes out to the house, whatever. They tend to trust that contractor first because that contractor becomes the basis of comparison for all the other ones that do the estimate. They do an estimate with, right? Because that they're literally comparing everybody back. I'm not saying that you're going to win every single time if you're the first, but if you seek to be the first and you operationally are able to answer the phone, respond to message leads very quickly. So Google local services ads have message leads, Angie has message leads, Yelp has message leads, Thumbtack, those other ones. Those are, if you were able to respond to those messages really quickly and use like an autoresponder or automation or something to help that along, qualify that lead, you're going to see your lead volume go way up, and a lot more of those leads are going to convert. Now, the type of contractors, I would say that, without necessarily putting my finger on any like type per se, the ones who are more organized operationally, so like PE groups would tend to fall into this thing, they generally have a game plan and a locked in playbook to answer the phones, to roll a truck, to get somebody out there, probably to speak to the value of their services somewhere along the line to help mitigate cost concerns. And then they lay out clear next steps when that estimate is not approved on site, and they're better at follow up. And those are the guys who are making all the money in the industry right now. And that's one of the things I think, Wes, I've been, we specialize really in working with contractors in the 2 to 10 million range at Mediagistic. I'm not saying we don't work with people on the lower end, we don't work with people on the higher end, but that's like a lot of the contractors we work with are in that revenue range. And I think I read something on ACHR News recently that says that there's a lot of pressure right now on the HVAC middle class, the ones who are really kind of in that 2 to 4 million range. And that's where a lot of the pressure is happening, because, some of them are operationally sound and they're able to handle these leads in a really intentional way. And some just aren't, and they really are struggling. And I mean, I know, I heard a podcast from Paul Maskell last year that said that a lot of contractors in that range are only 2 to 3 months away from going out of business, because
Wow.
It's just really hard to scale a business when you get to that level and really get past that plateau,
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think this feeds into a little bit of the topic, and we covered a little bit already, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the state of HVAC marketing and just generally the state of HVAC. So, I mean, we talked a bit about homeowner behavior. So if you can touch on like, if there's anything else you want to add on how has homeowner behavior changed the last few years, that would be great. If not, we can move on to the next question.
Yeah. I can't emphasize enough that, I'd say the 4 fundamental mentalities that drive somebody to purchase HVAC services are probably never going to change, right? So when we're talking about that, we're talking about reactive. Those are the ones who let their system break and then they call a contractor, and those are usually going with either your good or your better kind of like estimates. You've got the proactive shoppers, but now they're shopping more providers and getting more estimates. And in really cost intensive states, that's happening more. So there's a shift in the more proactive buying, because, the cost of an HVAC system is roughly the cost of like a compact car these days. So in those markets, there's more proactive buying behavior happening, and they're shopping more providers. There are people who are dormant. They're not actively searching for HVAC at the moment, and those are the ones that you can reach through like brand advertising and having really strong offers. So that's a set that if you're really good at it, you can activate those. And then finally, you've got ones who are already brand loyal. They already live in your database and already on your maintenance plan. So those 4 areas, I don't believe are really ever going to change fundamentally, but how many people in your service areas fall into which one of those 4 buckets is rapidly shifting, I would say. And then the tools they're using to find your business are changing as well. So like Google's a player that, they own intent right now. They own local services ads, they own maps, they own organic search. And I don't think that's going to completely change. Like Google has made a deal with Apple to become the fundamental, like foundational large language model provider for Apple phones as well. So like they've kind of built a moat around what happens at the device level, and people just use voice search right on their device because they own Android. So obviously Gemini is the foundational tool, AI and kind of answer engine optimization tool on those devices, and now Apple devices. So that's pretty much the whole market from a device standpoint. But then, people are shifting to using ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, some of those other large language models out there. ChatGPT is the biggest right now. And those are becoming competitors to Google. So really, I would say that that's one of the big things that contractors need to keep in mind is Google right now is still what's working. That's really where leads are coming from. But the search environment in the next year is going to become so much more varied. And hopefully there's going to be more competition in that environment to drive prices down for contractors, that it's more now about how do I get found by these engines while maintaining my market share and visibility in Google search, right? That's really kind of what contractors are up against.
And then, so I think a good follow-up question to that would be, there's a lot of different marketing channels, and I think they're ever changing. Today, what do you think, what channels do you think are driving the best ROI?
Yeah, I mean, local services ads, paid search, Google Maps, having an organic presence in Google Maps and being in the top 3, and then having an organic presence in Google search are really your foundational pieces that I think, if you don't have those things locked in, you really need to build those first. But other channels, these lead tools like Angie, Thumbtack, Yelp, they can produce a steady stream of higher volume, lower cost leads. It's just those leads have to be handled in a really different way. There's a real immediacy and a different buyer mentality happening in those channels. So those are not weak plays. It's just they're harder leads to handle because it's not one-to-one. It's going to other providers, and you have to be really quick to snatch those up, answer them, and try to nurture those into, kind of one a buying behavior. A buying behavior. So I'd say those are working right now. Overlaying that with some building a really strong brand is very important because driving brand recognition gets you out of the AC repair near me mentality, where if you can influence customers to search for your specific brand because you have the strongest brand equity in the market, you're paying pennies on the dollar. And then also that pays off in these large language models and search engines and things like that. So really, I wouldn't say any one channel is a silver bullet. It's really one of those things more where it's you have to look at the mix of channels and how effective they are in your market and how competitive you can be, and then land on the right combination for your market and your service area. And it's one of those things where, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. You start putting these things together and they have sort of amplification effects on each other.
Do you think that with all these changes in digital, like field marketing, billboards, TV, yard signs, door hangers, do you see that as a place that's being underinvested, or do you think people properly investing in it?
That's an interesting question. So when I was talking about the 4 buyer mentalities, I don't know per se that, neighborhood marketing and field marketing, traditional marketing necessarily move the needle that hard in the reactive environment. The ones who, they had a system breakdown, they're searching for you. Yeah, if you can build up a lot of brand equity in that market with billboards and TV, you're going to do pretty well. But, you're really kind of making a play to be the biggest dog in your market when you do that. Where I think it can be effective is when you think about those dormant buyers, right? The ones who aren't activated. Because the interesting thing about HVAC is, I hate to break it to folks, but HVAC is not a pair of Jordans. It's not a Gucci handbag, and it's not a trip to the Bahamas. People are not actively searching for HVAC unless they have.
People don't want to be.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It doesn't validate them on social media. It doesn't elevate their social status. It doesn't do any of those things that make people go to their social feeds and buy, a commodity. It's really top of mind when there's a pain point, right? So that's the thing to keep in mind. But that, with all that being said, if you are thinking of, okay, well, how do I activate people in my market who aren't actively searching for HVAC services right now? Well, it kind of comes down to where are the highest value neighborhoods in my market, right? Who are those, where are those, back, about 10 years ago, it was everybody wanted to get in the woodlands in Texas, right? It was a high value market and everybody's like, I want to show up there. So where are those neighborhoods like the woodlands where you can identify, hey, this is a high value neighborhood with like aging homes, but these are affluent homeowners, or if I can activate them, they're gonna actively be interested in my services. And then you look at, how do I make myself very visible through maybe not just traditional channels, but with like geo fenced ads and streaming television ads and things like that. How can I get super visible in that market to those homeowners, because that is a high value neighborhood for me. I think if you combine that with door hangers, maybe that's where the billboard is adjacent to that market where people are kind of sitting in traffic to get in and out of those neighborhoods or school areas or whatever. And that's where I think you can really make a play for those types of marketing behaviors.
Interesting. I want to shift the topic a little bit now to our second segment, which is like OEM, distributor, contractor alignment when it comes to marketing. I think one of the things that the best dealers do is they collaborate with their distributor and manufacturer on the entire ecosystem when it comes to just more broad, like marketing, but more broadly, like business strategy. Yep. And so I think this is an area that some of the dealers in the HVAC space do really well. Some probably just ignore it. I know that you all at Mediagistic work with some of this ecosystem. So I'm curious on your thoughts. So first question here, what separates a strong OEM or distributor partnership from a weak one when it comes to the HVAC dealer?
Yeah, I mean, manufacturers are one of the biggest resources for contractors, in our opinion. We work very closely with manufacturers, specifically in designing and executing their co-op programs, the marketing co-op programs. So being able to drive dollars down through the contractor channel and get there, the manufacturers are not able to go direct to the consumer for the most part, right? I mean, I think that's a reality we all know. So it's a space where it's B to B to C, because most of the manufacturers do not have the capability to come out and install, an AC system on a pad outside someone's home, make sure it passes an inspection and connect it to the ductwork. They can't do that. And so they really need the contractor to sort of represent them in the market and be good stewards of their equipment, their brand, install it correctly, all that. So in order for them to do that, obviously they have to incentivize contractors to work with them and provide a lot of value. So they do that they do that in terms of providing really structured business advice. Like, I know a lot of the manufacturers and distributors have to sort of be like business consultants for their contractor. So that's something, if I were a contractor, that's what I would look for the most is, are they providing me with strong, a strong vetted network of vendors, first off, that they trust and they have strong relationships with? Are those vendors, providing valuable services? Are they providing value to me? And then are they providing tools and guidance for me to grow my business in a way that that's really going to move the needle for me? And if all the answer is yes, then I would say you're working with a strong manufacturer and a strong distributor in that space.
Do you think it's better for a contractor to kind of be loyal to one brand or kind of have a number of them in their pocket that they work with?
That's a good question. I think there are advantages to both, obviously. If you are a larger contractor and you're installing a lot of different types of equipment, you have a lot of different types of folks in your service area, you may have to, depending on the manufacturer and the types of equipment they offer, and some of the rebates they provide and things like that. So there is business logic to doing that, I think. But on the other hand, it's like the more you sell of a particular type of equipment, the more eligible for co-op. You become based on your sales. So those are dollars that you can then reinvest into your marketing, or you can invest in automation tools, or, we've seen contractors get systems and then use them for sweepstakes and giveaways and things like that, or they provide them, to a local charity of some kind, and they use it to get press. There's lots of different plays, I think, if you partner with the manufacturer from that perspective. And then again, it's, how much value does that manufacturer provide as a business consultant and from a support standpoint, because it's like, you're probably going to get more support from them. You're going to get more buy-in from them the more bought in you are with that manufacturer. So I think there's pluses and minuses. I would say for the folks in our sweet spot, which is the 2 to 10 million. But again, we work with folks across all, from 1 truck to 100 trucks. But I'm just saying, in that space, they may find that they have a better outcome by working with a limited number of manufacturers, if not just one.
What do you think that distributors can do, or how do they do it to help contractors market more effectively?
Well, there's a lot there. One thing I'll say is that it is making their co-op programs as turnkey as possible for the contractor to execute is key, right? Because one of the biggest lost opportunities in all of digital marketing is co-op marketing. So those dollars, billions of dollars from manufacturers, be it car manufacturers, HVAC manufacturers, outdoor power equipment manufacturers, those dollars go unused. Why do they go unused? Because there's a lot of friction in a lot of those programs, right? And if they're executed poorly, the contractor will think that they're going to get reimbursed for marketing, and then they'll run the campaign, and then they'll find that they're not going to get reimbursed. And so they end up holding the bag on, dollars that they really thought that they were going to get subsidized. Now, who's at fault there? That is up for debate. It could be they don't clearly understand the rules, because the idea is that generally the ads need to be co-branded. They need to be used in a particular channel that the manufacturer feels is going to be productive. There are guidelines around how they need to be co-branded. And then there's backup and proof that you need to submit to the manufacturer in order to get the reimbursement. So, what we do, and this isn't necessarily a plug for Mediagistic, but what we do to kind of take the pain out of the process is we are the facilitator of all of that, right? So we work with the manufacturer to make sure we have a clear understanding of their co-op guidelines. We develop creative and invest in marketing channels that we know are going to get reimbursements. We partner with the dealer to make sure that the message works for them and is going to resonate in their local market and properly reflects their brand as well. And then we put that into the market, and then we'll even go handle the reimbursement for them. Like, we will submit it on their behalf. And so I think, without sounding too self-promotional, what the manufacturers can do and the distributors can do is they find a way, whether it is through an agency like Mediagistic or their own way, of removing as much friction and as much pain from that process as they can for the contractor. So the contractor can do what they're good at, which is, they need to be out in the field installing systems, running their business, and not letting their business run them. But on the other hand, it's like, obviously the manufacturer has to have their brand represented in the market in a certain way, because otherwise, if you make, let's just say, for example, you make the manufacturer logo microscopically small, what is the manufacturer getting out of that? You know what I mean? So it's sort of like, it's a symbiotic relationship where both sides are really getting a benefit, but it's like, making that whole process easy as possible to execute and to redeem those dollars is really, really where the devil is in the details, right?
Yeah, really interesting. And I think that you provide a unique look into that ecosystem, because I would say you're acting as the glue between them all for your customers. And so you see kind of like the ins and outs. So I think that's a really valuable perspective. So thanks for giving that.
And at the end of the day, I think a weak setup for everybody involved is when all the parties are telling a different story in the market, right? Like they're not aligned. They don't have a clearly shared set of goals, and they're not necessarily, building towards the same end. You know what I mean? So the best OEM, distributor, and contractor setups really act like one marketing team with three roles, as opposed to like three disconnected budgets and three disconnected messages that aren't really all kind of rowing the boat in the same direction.
Yeah. All right. I think the next segment that I want to cover is on lifetime customer value, memberships, retention, maintenance agreements, et cetera. So this is a really interesting topic that I would love your insight on. Here at SmartAC, not trying to plug us, but we focus a lot on this area of the HVAC contractors business through memberships and retention, because, that day one service visit that comes from a Google ad, local service ads, one of these like language learning models doesn't always go to a replacement, right? And that's the big ticket item, is what a lot of people are chasing. And you mentioned earlier on the podcast that the homeowner right now is I think this year it's recovering a bit, but they're not really trending towards the replacement as much as the short-term fix. So I think when you're talking about retention, this is a huge area, because that will not always be the trend, in my opinion. And so eventually, like, these systems are going to break. And so I want to get your thoughts on this. First of all, like, why do you think memberships have become such a critical growth lever for HVAC dealers?
If you think about it, they kind of always have been, because like one thing over the 12 years that I've worked in this industry is, you peak your peaks in the summer, right? That's when demand is high. That's when a lot of the repair and even, installs and replacement kind of business happens. And then when you hit the shoulder seasons, one of the chief pain points for the contractors that I talk to pretty much every single day is that they have to send their guys home. Things get slow. They're like, what do I do to keep these folks on my staff where I'm paying them consistently? They have enough work, and I am not just like, fighting to keep my business afloat, right? So I see, first off, having a strong membership program is your way to smooth out those peaks and valleys and really get through your spring and fall, right? Like, so the contractors who really have focused on that are the ones who reap the benefit during these times. They have a lot easier sort of time of getting through the shoulder seasons than the ones who are just living and dying by their summer, peak winter business, when replacement repair demand is very high, right? Mm-hmm. So that would be the first thing. So I think it's always been a reality. What I think it is your customer acquisition costs have gone up high. There's more competition in the marketplace. Your average homeowner is price comparing more. So those are all things that are placing pressure on this environment, and the membership thing is kind of floating to the top. It's becoming more apparent that having a strong membership program is very, very important. And, that the real deal, I would say, Wes, is, this has always been a reality, is it costs somewhere between 5 to 25 times more to acquire a new customer than it does to retain an existing one, and you can look back many years and see that that's always been kind of the common prevailing wisdom, that your initial acquisition cost of a customer is very, very high. It is in the lifetime relationship with that customer, where they make not one purchase from you, but 2, 3, 4 purchases, that initial customer acquisition cost becomes more feasible, because you've already spent a lot to attain that customer. It costs much less to continue driving revenue through that same customer if you're able to do it. So really, you want to look at not what is a customer worth to me on that initial purchase? What is the value of that home to me over the course of a 10, 15, 20-year period, where multiple service calls have happened, you've had maybe 1 or 2 replacements, you've sold a couple IAQ add-ons, et cetera. Maybe, you've got recurring revenue through the maintenance program as well. That revenue potential is many multiples of that first job. And so that's very important to understand, is that when you're really thinking in the value of what is a customer worth to me, you really need to be thinking in terms of value per household over time rather than value per ticket. And so what your main tool of doing that is, well, how am I, how efficiently am I converting a service call or an install into a maintenance, agreement, right? Because truly those are the ones who are your customers that are in your database. When you look at your database, just because they've done a repair with you or just because they did an install with you once, I would challenge you and say that's not necessarily your customer. If they're on a maintenance plan where they're paying you recurring dollars to service and maintain their equipment, that's when you can say, yes, that is my customer. And that customer has a lifetime value for my business. So my question then is, if you are doing that, what are you doing to increase those programs? What are you doing to maintain top of mind awareness with those customers? What are you doing to not just take that customer who's on a maintenance plan, but to turn them into a loyal brand advocate who's going to go amplify your brand to their friends and family? They're going to go recommend you actively in their local Facebook neighborhood group or whatever. Do you have a referral program in place? Are you doing things that really are going to keep that customer in your ecosystem and, really continuing the purchase from you over the course of that 10 to 20 year period that you may have a relationship with them,
Yeah. And I think that's all, it's music to my ears. That's a lot of the stuff we focus on here at SmartAC. We see data as the kind of key component to facilitating a better lifetime value for the customer. So that's one of our pillars here. But when it comes to marketing strategies that can help improve retention, like how do you feel that plays in to a maintenance and memberships?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So obviously email and so any way you can communicate with, let me take a step back. The number one owned business asset that most businesses have that they are not using, it is the most valuable asset in their business, is their database, right? And we did a survey to all the businesses in our database and asked them, how well do you think you are utilizing your field service management tool, which, that would be your Service Titan, Field Edge, House Call Pro, Workies, whatever. How well do you think you're using its features, and are you using it to build and grow your business? And I think a pretty small amount responded and said that they really were highly confident that they were using it in an intentional way. It was a lot more like, I think 15% of everybody we surveyed responded with that, maybe less. So anything you can do to that database to communicate with them is a marketing motion that you could potentially use to drive loyalty, advocacy, awareness, and value, right? So email is one, SMS is another. There are things like ringless bypass voicemail, where you can do a phone call and bypass the actual ring on the phone and leave a voicemail. Remarketing audiences, custom audiences you can use on display, social media. Those are all really strong plays for that. And I think one of the things that I am interested in as a marketer is how can you trigger different types of communications to different segments of your database? Because, getting a sense of where they're at in terms of their needs, their problems, their buying journey is really what is key to activating a purchasing behavior from them, right? So data connected motions like what you're describing, if you can actually obtain data from the system and pull it back into your Service Titan and then activate an outbound marketing motion based on those data points, that's really appealing in a lot of ways in terms of getting a better sense of what is the right message at the right moment to those individuals and those homeowners.
Yeah, I mean, you're just hitting them when it's relevant, and that helps you stay top of mind, A, when things are going wrong, but B, during some of the slower seasons. So, thanks for touching on that piece a bit. Before we get into the closing here, the last segment I kind of really want to touch on is just the future of HVAC marketing, especially as it relates to technology and AI. I think I mean, AI is changing every industry right now. So I would love to have a discussion on how it's changing the home services industry specifically. So, what do you think the role of AI will be playing and is playing for the HVAC marketing sphere over the next 5 years?
That's a really good question. So, SEMrush, which is a really popular SEO tool, search engine optimization, SEO, what that stands for. They say that traditional Google search will be overtaken by large language model search, so ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, Claude. That'll happen as soon as 2027. So we're supposedly about
Hmm.
6 months away from that happening. Now, other industry experts think it's on a little longer timeline, so 2030. But we're in a roughly like a 1 to 3 year window where traditional search is still king, although more and more people are using AI search. And we're kind of at like an inflection point where it just at some point it'll flip like a switch, and everyone will just be using AI search as the predominant modality of search. Now, the way that these work right now is they answer questions, they surface providers and recommendations in a way that, there's usually fewer providers, and then they don't usually result in a click. It may even provide a phone number or something right there in the search result, and then they may call directly from that search result. So I think the thing to understand is we're probably going to have to move from a world where we're really looking at attributable conversion data by channel and tying everything back, and we're really looking at search engine optimization. I think the new way of understanding that is going to be, how visible am I, and what
Yeah.
metrics can I place around that visibility? Am I showing up for certain prompts? Now, keep in mind, this is only right now, chat gpt has something like uh, 3 trillion searches a month, and Google has something like 13 trillion. So like, we're not necessarily talking like we're talking about a very small percentage right now of overall search behavior. So I'm not saying everybody needs to run out and start measuring how often you're showing up in prompts and things like that. But I would say start getting a plan in place, right? Because this
Yeah.
will come and it will happen. And, I think a couple things to understand also is that these everything's becoming more black box and automated. So bidding, targeting, creative rotation. So you're going to have to take a step back and look at metrics on your side that you can measure. So customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, and close rates are really the metrics I would be looking at in terms of how effective am I being, from a business operation standpoint, in terms of taking advantage of the opportunities I'm getting.
Yeah. Do you think there's a chance that these ChatGPT, Claude, etc. of the world take on like a Google local services mentality where they're going to start to charge the contractor to be listed, or do you think they're just going to go away from that?
Yeah, I here's what's already happening is ads are starting to appear in ChatGPT and these other search results. So I think that's going to happen, and it's going to happen in a more organized way, and it'll probably the same thing that happened with Google will ultimately happen in these tools, right? Is that, if you're as old as I am, you may recall the day when Google was nothing but blue links and all the ads were appeared in the sidebar of your search,
Yep.
and it's so like you had the organic in the middle and then all the ads were on the side. And then they took the ads and they put them on top of the organic search, and then they added the Google local map pack and they pushed, organic down. And so the map pack and the ads, and then they moved everything down again and they added the local services ads. And now you've got local services ads, paid search, Google local map pack. Those are all Google properties. And then finally you have the organic search. Organic search never went away, but Google systematically de-emphasized it and moved their own products above it. So I don't necessarily think that isn't going to happen with these tools. What I can say is that, the way that Google became the predominant search engine that everybody knows and loves and uses is that Google initially sought to provide the best answer to your question, right? So it created signals
Yeah.
trust signals around those answers to provide a lot of value to the end user. And ultimately, that was how Google won the search engine wars, and they did that forever. And then they started injecting everything with ads. And so now we're moving back into an environment that resembles the search engine wars of the 2000s again. And there's going to be multiple providers who are competitors to Google. So if these tools become overly monetized and are unable to provide the best answer for your search, and they just become glorified ad serving platforms, people will probably move on to the next tool, right? They'll move over to the tool that's not doing that. So this is why having, ideally, not a monopoly, because that's basically what happened, right? Google got a monopoly and then it monetized it. Having an environment where we're not in a monopoly anymore, there are multiple search engines, there's multiple options for the searcher to choose from, creates a better outcome for businesses because, it's not overly monetized. So my hope would be that continues to happen. We continue to live in an environment that has competition, real competition to Google, and that drives better outcomes for us, both as people who are searching in the platforms, right? Because I don't think my experience with Google over the last 5 years has been nearly as good as it was in like 2016, 2017. So better outcomes for us as searchers, and then better outcomes for the businesses who are doing all the right things from a reputation, services, and like quality of service standpoint, that they get found in these tools based on merit. That's the real hope. But yeah, I mean, there are going to be ads. Let's not kid ourselves. There's going to be ads. There's going to be paid placement in these environments. But hopefully it's not sort of the slot machine style environment that we've been in for the past like 5 to 7 years. That's very, you can just buy the market out no matter how good of a provider you are or not,
I think consumers just generally get fed so many ads these days, and you can't really go anywhere without seeing an ad. I have one last question on actually the consumer here. So I was at a panel month ago or so where this big HVAC contractor in Minnesota was kind of talking about, it was a room full of like AI providers, stuff like that, and was talking about how their customers have actually started asking like how they're leveraging AI in their business. And she brought up some of the environmental stuff that people hear about like the water. And so I guess my question is like, do you see that the consumer is actually going to become apprehensive about working with companies that leverage AI? Or like, do you think that's not going to happen, or maybe a mix? I'm just curious, like your thoughts.
It's an interesting question.
Kind of a crazy question. I don't know.
I think it's getting so hard coded into our technology stacks and consumer search behavior that it's just so pervasive in our lives that I really don't think anyone's going to have any choice, honestly, be it a, consumer or a contractor, because the ones probably who aren't using it are going to fall behind and go out of business. Or they won't be visible in searches. And so they'll be like working wholly from a word of mouth kind of campaign, or maybe like guerrilla marketing or something. Because
which some contractors do, some do, but like, I agree with you.
Yeah. I think it's a reality that whether you agree with it or not, whether you have ethical reservations about AI or AI tools or not, I think it's here to stay, and it's going to grow,
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm just curious your thoughts. That was the first time I've heard something like that come up. And I think for people that pay attention to industry news, like everyone, and just generally economic news, is just everything's about AI right now. And so that was the first time I've heard that. I thought it was an interesting thing that they were getting questions on that.
I had not considered that. I've not encountered that yet, but I also live in Florida.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So
she was just kind of saying like to the AI companies that were there, just
yeah.
we're starting to get
Well,
into the
I
business.
think
So
there are some.
it was help us tell the story. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, I think there are valid concerns around the ethical use of AI. There are valid concerns around the impact on our world, the impact on our minds, the impact on, data privacy. Like we are in a technological wild west right now.
Yeah.
The only thing I can say is that we have gone through that before as an industry. We've gone both as a marketing industry and as the HVAC industry, because the advent of the web and .coms and Google and all this stuff, like really, there's nothing new under the sun here, and people survived it. They navigated it, and here we are. 26 years later, from when mass adoption of the internet really started to take hold. I guess it really started in the 90s, but when people really started, because in the late 90s, early 2000s, the question was, is this internet thing a fad? Is it really going to be something people can monetize and build businesses around? The .com bubble happened and it burst, and like people were like, see, that means that this is a fad and businesses aren't going to be able to survive on the web. And that, it's just kind of like a toy or something. And now here we are, like everybody's businesses are built around the web. It's the core technology and our lives rotate around it so much. So I just think we're kind of at one of those stages in society and in technology where a new technology is emerged, and we're very much finding ourselves in a moment when we're looking at a technology that we're going to be using for the rest of our lives, for better or for worse,
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. All right. So last segment here, and then we'll go into closing. I like to ask a few rapid fire questions. The purpose of these are just like very quick answers. So I have a few of them here. First one, most overrated marketing tactic.
I think the most overrated marketing tactic that's going to go out of style is just throw more money at it, search or whatever, Google, and hope for the best without tight tracking, offer strategy, or conversion rate optimization. So really looking at those pieces holistically and looking at how your brand gets represented online, and not even investing in your brand as an asset or investing in your database. That's overrated. And it's honestly, it's going to go away,
Yeah. So on the flip, would you say that the flip is the most underrated?
I would say taking a marketing channel and basically just tactic would be focusing on establishing credibility, trustworthiness, and all that stuff that makes a consumer want to work with you through consistent educational messaging and video that really matches the intent of how people research. So questions, answering questions, creating valuable content, and taking into mind that they probably are watching short clips and talking to, large language models about their questions that are upstream, maybe from making a purchase.
Yeah.
The more you are able to invest in creating valuable, knowledgeable content around those things, the better you're going to be. So people are going to be talking to these tools before they call a contractor, and they're going to be like, not just who is the best contractor in my or best HVAC contractor in my area. They're probably going to ask those things, questions like, why won't my thermostat go below 78? Or why is there like a warm spot in my living room? Or, why is my humidity so high? They're going to ask those questions that are upstream. So being able to sort of think like a knowledgeable consultant and articulate that content on the web in a way that really kind of drives value is going to help you with your visibility in these tools. And ultimately, that's underrated right now. People aren't doing that as much as they should be.
Well, Eddie, I think it was great to have you on today. I want to just close this out and really appreciate you coming on today. Where can people find out about Mediagistic?
Yeah, that one's pretty easy. Just visit www.mediagistic.com. There's no S on the name, although I think we bought the domain because people say it with the S a lot. So you probably can add the S and still land on our website, but it's mediagistic.com, and you'll find tons of information there.
Great. Well, thanks for joining Beyond the Truck Roll. If you want to look and get an audit of your membership system and see how you can improve it, check out smartac.com. Eddie, thanks for joining. I think this has been a great episode.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Wes. And looking forward to the next time we talk.